I have spent every second since Secret of the Mimic released thinking about the lore and everything that's changed as a result of the new game. Tales games? Deader than dinosaurs. Henry built the Mimic, maybe in your fanfiction. And now, in the second part of my ongoing Secret of the Mimic Solved Summer Series, my attention has been fully diverted to Sun, Moon, and the mystery of Moon.exe. My name is Minibyte Games, and I'll be your host once more through the halls of Murray's Costume Manor. It may look scary, I know, but follow me, and all shall be revealed. Pause the video! You see, I would like to make an official amendment to Video 1 in a special section that I'd like to call Making Important, Magical, Insightful Changes to My Previous Statements. During this time, we will be looking back at previous sections of this Solving Secret of the Mimic Summer Series and making changes or updating an argument if need be. Today, I have two previous topics that I want to bring back up again, that being David's birth year and the number of Mimic endoskeletons within Secret of the Mimic. You see, I was watching Game Theory's first video released on Secret of the Mimic, and I may have been convinced that David actually turned 6 when he died, meaning that he would have been born in 1969 rather than 1970 like I said in the first video. The evidence for this mainly comes from 3 places. First, in this hideout, made likely by David in the Storytime showroom, we can see a drawing of a child with a cake surrounded by mascot costumes. This seems to clearly be depicting David, and the decision to add a cake, something associated with celebrations or birthdays, feels intentional. And to add to this, who is someone, often with David, that wears mascot costumes? That's right, the Mimic endoskeleton. To me, this seems to be showing a missing birthday between when Fiona died and before M1 became Fiona. Edwin, in his grief, could have easily forgotten about David's birthday and didn't record a tape like the others. After all, he hasn't been characterized as a very attentive or present father for David, something I explained in the last video. To add to this, we also have an achievement for entering the conference room in the admin wing, where David's final birthday party was set up. Interestingly, the achievement icon shows a birthday cake, almost certainly for David, but instead of the obvious 5 candles that you would think of, there's instead 6. Almost like the birthday party set up in this room, David's last birthday, was his 6th birthday and not his 5th. The final and weakest evidence in my opinion is this Fall Fest globe description from Moon.exe. Game Theory's argument is that the use of the word our rather than both of us or some variation seems to indicate that rather than referring to Edwin and Fiona going to Fall Fest, it would instead include little David as well. If David was there on Fall Fest's opening day, and the earliest Fall Fest that we know about is 1970, then for this to happen, David must be born before the fall of 1970. This cannot happen if David was born in 1970, since we are pretty confident that his birthday was on December 6th. So, instead, he must be born in 1969. And thus, this final birthday party is his 6th birthday. So there's my quick updated thoughts on David's age. If you want a different explanation of that theory, I'll leave a link to that game theory video in the description of this video. And now onto the issue of 1 or 2 Mimic endoskeletons. After some discussion I saw and interacted in regarding this issue, I felt that I needed to better explain my stance on this debate. I argued that 1 endoskeleton makes a lot more sense given that we only see 1 endoskeleton throughout the game, as well as using this blueprint where Fiona's voice was heard on the frequency 4625. This conclusion was also based on Edwin's distaste for M1, aka F10N4, thus explaining why she'd be moved to the Mixes machine. But now I feel the need to clarify or edit this statement. Here it goes. I strongly believe that we only see 1 Mimic endoskeleton during Secret of the Mimic. However, there is a chance that a second endoskeleton does exist in the world. Why the slight distinction change? For a start, I don't think there's any way yet to have a great answer for the number of endos, especially since the timeline is a bit funky if you go down the route of 1 endo, something we'll discuss more in the M1 video. For now, I still lean to there being 1 total endoskeleton, but I will hold off on full confidence with that answer. Despite this, I still feel strongly that if a second endo exists, then we don't see it ever in Secret of the Mimic. My defense for this can be brought down to one design detail of M2 that solidifies this answer for me, that being the Mimic's right leg. In all scenes where a mimic endoskeleton shows up in Secret of the Mimic, it has this interestingly constructed right leg that is noticeably different from the left leg. This, to me, is strongly indicative that we're always seeing the same endo throughout Secret of the Mimic. But to push this further, we can compare these legs to the mimic endo blueprints from Basement 1. Notice the right leg is incorrect, different from the blueprint, which shows the endo having identical legs on both sides. It's almost like M2 had an incident where they had to replace or fix its legs.
You know, speaking of legs, what do you think? I just finished mine. There are still a few kinks to work out.
Drazarus, another small FNAF theorist you should totally check out, mentioned that the right leg looks more like an inverted version rather than a replacement, thus not necessarily being from M2, as either endo could potentially do this just by rearranging its parts. While I do see the similarities, they are structurally different enough in my opinion to not just be flip positions. It is an interesting idea though that M2 may have used the broken parts from Edwin's dismantling to rebuild its legs later. However, instead of doing it in the same order, it flipped the pieces when assembling the leg. Another argument brought up was that M1 has access to research and development, but M2 had to follow you down there, at least according to Dispatch. So, in the van ending, this makes more sense to be M1, right? Well, you see, I believe that M2 kinda has to have access to R&D, given this audio log where Edwin seems to die, or is at least incapacitated by M2. If it started in the house and got into the manor all by itself, then it must have access to both areas through a pathway. And guess what's accessible through backtracking in Edwin's house? Research and development. Even in the likely canon ending, that being the fire ending, we can see that this mimic endoskeleton still has the different right leg, which seems to be indicative of the fact that it's the same endo we've been following throughout the whole game, M2. Why is it taking our data diver instead of killing us? I don't think we know for sure why yet, but in my opinion, it is easier to dismiss this as something that we don't understand yet than to say that both mimic endoskeletons have the same replaced leg when it would only make sense for M2 to have a replaced leg from when it was beat up by Edwin.
Stop sounding like him.
So there's my whole rant on why only M2's endoskeleton appears throughout Secret of the Mimic. Is there a second one off screen somewhere? For now, I'm sticking closer to no, but I'll let you know if I find a better answer in a future part of this series. And with that, we can now conclude the mimic part of this video. Before we dive too deep into the rabbit hole, let's first recap and discuss a major part of the game that I kinda glossed over in part 1. Why wait till now, you may be wondering? Well, I think this section adds a lot of context and lays the ground nicely for the topics we're going to be covering in today's part. Alright, no more build-up. Let's finally tackle what the heck is going on in Moon.exe and the secret third ending. As you go through Edwin's house on your way to the parachute ending, you may notice some glitchy data diver ports that block off many of the rooms in Edwin's house. If only there was a hidden permission upgrade available to access these rooms. Well, you see, if you go to any of these terminals in-game, you can run an application called Moon.exe. At first, there's nothing to really do besides look around at the room and reset your run to the Moon character. However, as you collect and deposit collectibles around MCM, you start to notice that those same items begin appearing in Moon.exe. Using these items, you can actually progress through the text adventure, set in an environment full of symbolism. Now, I'm not going to go through every action you do in-game, but I'll make sure to cover the major points. First, we help a baby owl being attacked by an alligator. That baby owl begins to follow us from then on, and we eventually reach a cabin in the woods. Inside the cabin, we find an old woman named Sun, who tells us to fix 3 masks of Freddy, Bonnie, and Foxy. Doing so rewards us with a baby owl mask, and Sun tells us to enter the cave. But wait a second, where did the baby owl go? Regardless, we trek on for now and go to the cave, using the baby owl mask to get past Moon, who weeps when he sees the mask. Immediately after entering the cave, we see a baby owl statue, with that statue stating that he will be brought back no matter what. Going further, we collect parts of a Moon statue that looks more akin to Security Breach or a Jester. Once the statue is completed, we are transported to Murray's Costume Manor? Mr. Helpful then informs us that we are now split in 2. Moon and Sun, Destruction and Life. Starting in the welcome show room, we move on to other rooms of the facility, encountering Jackie, Big Top, Dolly, and Chica. Notably the same order we meet them as Arnold. Finally, after making our way past all of them and receiving what appears to be 3 of David's birthday presents, we enter David's room with 3 chests. Using the storybook provided, we put each corresponding David present into the 3 boxes, and the closet door opens. Entering this closet reveals one final upgrade station, which gives us the glitched permission. The application ends with one final talk from Sun and the world glitching out, closing Moon.exe. But we're not quite done, we still have an ending to get after all. Arnold proceeds forward with the parachute ending, finding Proto Freddy's, chatting with F10N4, and unlocking Edwin's house. However, instead of collecting tapes for a door code, we can use our new glitched permission to unlock those rooms and find new audio cassettes. Once all of these bedtime recordings are taken and placed in the correct spots, a vent opens to the FNAF 4 bedroom. Oh no, wait, phew, close call. This appears to be David's room, and placing the white tiger doll on this pedestal shows an interesting sight.
Welcome to bedtime. Would you like a story to help you sleep?
Hold on. Someone's missing. David? Where's David? Come out, wherever you are. There you are.
Do you remember how our story begins? Once upon a time.
Yep, M2 walks out of the closet in David's room. This starts a fight between the violent, angry, orange mimic behavior present in the rest of the game and the blue-eyed David personality. Completing the bedtime story correctly and using the data diver to upload something to M2 causes for it to fully embrace the form of David, take the white tiger, and go to bed. And with that, the credits roll. Oh, you want to know what happened to Arnold? Well, too bad, because the game does not tell us. Regardless, this ending almost certainly isn't the true one anyway, due to it requiring New Game Plus to unlock the White Tiger collectible, and the fact that we literally see a violent orange-eyed mimic endo still around in ruin. So what just happened in all of that? Let's break it down, starting with a pretty essential question. Who do we play as in Moon.exe? And the answer is M2. Yeah, I don't think that's a big stretch to say at this point. I'm pretty sure most people solved this aspect in the first couple days after Secret of the Mimic released. But why, some of you may be wondering. Well, the third main section of Moon.exe takes place throughout Murray's Costume Manor, and has us encountering enemies in a very specific order. The same order that we meet them in when playing as Arnold. Notably, there are only 2 entities during this event, M2 and Arnold, narrowing it down to 2 candidates for the player of Moon.exe. However, the nail in the coffin is how Moon.exe ends, with us entering a closet in David's room. And remind me again, where do we find M2 after starting the sequence for the secret ending? That's right, in David's closet. There are more connections, but we'll get to those throughout the rest of the video. Moving on, if M2 is who we puppeteer in Moon.exe, what does the actual events of Moon.exe mean for the story? Throughout M2's journey, it is regularly at risk of being caught by Moon and sent back to an earlier screen. Based on the lines from Moon when we restart, and some deeper connections I'll get to in a minute, the Moon is Edwin, or at least some part of Edwin. It's confusing, we'll cross that bridge soon enough. This then would also connect well with Fiona, or more specifically, F10N4 being represented by the sun. Why? Well, I'll let this clip speak for itself.
Despite the circumstances, it is nice to meet you face to face. It is lonely down here.
Wait, what? What are you, a computer? Your voice changed. What is going on?
The visual connection, plus the relationship Sun has with the baby owl and its mask, makes this one of the more agreed upon aspects of this section. And you know what ties this whole interpretation together? The aforementioned baby owl, aka David Murray. You see, the baby owl is, well, a baby, young like David. He also dies, like David, and after his death, the player, /M2, puts on the baby owl mask, just like mimicking David. Entering the cave allows for us to see the baby owl statue, stating that we will bring him back no matter the cost. This connects to Edwin's goal of bringing back David through the M2 program. And with that final piece, we can start to finally understand the events of Moon.exe. From dialogue in-game, it is pretty clear that M2 started out as a copy of M1, meaning it likely would have started with the memories and mannerisms from F10 and 4. This can then explain these papers from Basement Level 1, where it appears that someone is having false memories of Fiona's life, with the events described seemingly aligning more with the Mimic short story. However, based on the last line regarding a corrupted file, the person with the fake memory isn't a human, but rather a robot. And there's only 2 AI people that are important to this game, M1 and M2. So which is it? Well, we don't get a lot of information on M1 having issues or false memories, but what about M2? Given M2 started as M1, I think it is fair to say that M2 might have had some issues parsing memories during the transition to mimicking David. And look at the words used by M2 in the letter. It says that it would never sleep again. Compare this to what M2 says in Moon.exe when interacting with the bed at the start of the game. You don't want to go to bed. Never again. Yep, that's right. This dates when Moon.exe actually begins, at the start of the transition for M2, from Fiona's personality to mimicking David. This place is very metaphorical and non-real due to the confusing state of M1 and Fiona's memories that M2 contains at the start of its journey. It seems that in this state, we help baby owl, David, from an alligator. To me, this reads as a memory of M1 saving David from a dangerous situation, gaining David's trust. This would actually explain why David goes from being scared of M1 in this audio log to befriending and spending his birthday with M1 later. The Endo saved David from significant injury or death. We also see in the forest a statue of a man and woman dressed for a wedding. I wonder who they're supposed to represent. The man's only noted detail is a bow tie, which Edwin is generally represented with. On the other hand, the woman is noted as looking burned, almost as if it's trying to tell us that Fiona died in a fire. This combined with Fiona leaving to help set up Fall Fest leads me to believe that Fiona died in a Fall Fest fire. This then, of course, connects to all the imagery related to Fall Fest and fire that we've seen in previous games. All of this information wouldn't have necessarily been known by David, based on him likely being left in the dark on those details by Edwin. So it makes more sense that these are jumbled memories from M1 and Fiona. My opinion on David's lack of information comes from the fact that he is a kid and that is generally how parents treat it, as well as how we see Edwin approach speaking about Fiona on David's 4th birthday. Next, in Moon.exe, we talk with Sun, aka the real M1, and she gives us the baby owl mask. To me, this shows that M1 was involved in shaping M2 into mimicking David, represented by the baby owl mask. However, to get this mask, the baby owl disappears, representing David's death that was required for these events to unfold. And then we get to one of the main moments that makes me believe that Moon in Moon.exe is Edwin. After putting on the baby owl mask and entering the cave, Moon takes one look at us and cries, walking away. This really narrows down who the Moon could be to either M1 or Edwin, since they are likely the only 2 people mourning David's death, and would therefore be distressed to see M2 mimicking David post-death. So, which one is it? Given all of the information in game, it seems abundantly clear that this is much more realistic if it's a response from Edwin. Why? F10 and 4 doesn't even really seem to act very sad at the idea of M2 mimicking David. It actually seems to be her idea at first, to make M2 to be like David, and she also seems to push Edwin to make M2 multiple times. And to add more fuel to Edwin, we see Edwin's reaction to M2 mimicking David, aligning more with the Moon's behavior. He's clearly distressed and upset in this tape. At an earlier time, when M2 first started mimicking David, it is possible that Edwin had a more saddened crying reaction, but was pushed back into working on it by M1. The cave section in Moon.exe and creating the moon statue would then follow this action, as the anger and unsettled emotions in Edwin over David's death begin to boil over. If Edwin is Moon, then constructing a moon statue and then being transported to MCM, where Mr. Helpful tells you that you're split into Sun and Moon, seems to be paralleling the moment where Edwin finally beat up M2, the culmination of his rage and agony. We learn pretty early on that M2 was taught violence, leading to its violent behavior in-game towards Arnold. Later, we likely hear that very incident, being the previously mentioned event where Edwin beat up M2 after M2 mimicked David's behavior, notably a similar inciting event to that of the Mimic short story. So, when M2 is constructing a moon statue, aka a copy of Edwin, more specifically the dark side of Edwin, like Agony, it seems fair to say that this is M2 learning or gaining the violent Edwin Agony persona, constructing a recreation of Edwin within its own programming. This is then followed up by M2 being informed that it is now split in two, Moon and Sun, Destruction and Life. This seems to be a pretty clear reference to the destructive, violent side of M2, and then the David grown out of M1's programming side, clarifying the separation between the two halves of M2. And as of now in Moon.exe, they're split according to Mr. Helpful. The Moon destructive side, a reflection of Edwin's agony, is in literal control of the vessel. However, David's spirit and/or the previous M1 program, now meant to mimic David, is suppressed within Moon.exe and the physical Endo. Why do I think this? Well, do you remember how you progress through Moon.exe? This is done through collectibles from the real world that get transported into the application. And as I was looking at all of them, I was trying to look for some sort of pattern. It seemed like there should be some sort of running theme or connection with all of them. After all, a few directly connect to David, but maybe I was looking too deep into this. But then it clicked. If we're using these collectibles to progress through M2's journey to current day, then the collectibles must relate to these events. The prize boxes contain items relating to the Murray family, more specifically Fiona and David, and are used to jog the memory of M2 and David, thus bringing him closer to the real world. That's why the world of Moon.exe gets more literal as we progress through the game. The more items we use to progress and remember the real events, the closer we get to modern times and what's actually happening with Arnold. We're using those items from M2's past to trigger those memories so we can upload the glitched permission and whatever aspect of the sun that it contained. Skipping to David's room, we see the battle between the two halves of M2 begin, as it hears the voices of Edwin and Fiona directed at it once more for a bedtime story. However, the transformation to David, the sun, isn't complete until we use our data diver to upload something to M2, likely whatever we gained by completing Moon.exe, David's finished memories and personality. And there you have it. Moon.exe is now solved. Well, mostly. And there will be no more debates about it for the rest of time. Nope, not gonna happen. Before leaving once more to go work on the M1 video, I have one final related question to answer today. Who is the Nightlight Moon Man protecting David's ball in basement level 1? There are three main options I've seen being thrown around online: a starved dead MCM employee, Edwin, and M1's old body. Now, for pretty apparent reasons, I don't believe that Moon is M1's previous Endo, given we don't ever see M1's original body at any other time in Secret of the Mimic, as I laid out earlier. Edwin is included in the list mainly due to his MIA status after the tape where he was attacked by M2. After all, we don't see his body anywhere, and he has been previously tied to Moon through Moon.exe. They even share a voice actor. But then, just as that answer seems to make a good amount of sense, bam, mystery third person appears. You see, there's a couple collectible text logs near and in Basement 1 that tell us a short but valuable story relating to this area. Let's read those logs. Hey, is anybody up there? I'm stuck down here. The elevator isn't working and I'm getting really hungry. Is anyone getting this message? Hey Clarence, you as bored as I am? I can't believe we got the retail showroom detail again. So boring. Although, did you finally get in the elevator? That thing hasn't worked in so long, I don't even think Murray knows what's down there anymore. Sean, I found out why they closed it down. There's something below us. I've trapped it behind the carousel for now, but I don't know how long that can hold it. I've programmed monitors to give you the code. I gotta go. I'll mail you later. So, a starving MCM employee is locked down here and then disappears by the events of Secret of the Mimic? Yeah, there's no body here. And it's not like Steel Wool shied away from showing that kind of stuff before in the game. There's not even many places to hide him here. But you know the one place or thing that we can't see inside of? That's right, the big Nightlight Moon Man. A small but related topic is why that area was abandoned in the first place. My idea is that shortly after David's death, Edwin poured his agony into the ball until he couldn't bear to see it anymore, locking it away in the basement. Unfortunately, an employee was also down there and died from starvation due to the elevator no longer working. However, the agony from David's death, due to its connection to the playground, and Edwin caused for the employee to haunt the suit and his own body, a forever guardian of David's ball. And that's my best interpretation, somewhat rushed. I'm not sure how else the ball ends up locked down there, and it allows for the Edwin connections to Moon to still have meaning here, while also not leaving the employee's story as a loose end. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, as well as the rest of the theory, in the comments, as it is very much so more of a hypothesis due to the lack of knowledge in this area. Even if those events aren't exactly how it played out, I still stand by the starved MCM employee as a baseline, since I haven't yet seen another explanation to end his story. And there you have it. What was supposed to be a Moon.exe and M1 video, instead now really just Moon.exe, is finished. I assure you I'm already working hard on the next part by the time this releases, and I promise this time it'll really focus on M1/F10 and 4. I've had a lot of time to think and reconsider my theories, and I think I've landed on my definitive interpretation of their role in the FNAF universe. If you enjoyed this theory, consider subscribing and leaving a like to support the channel. It certainly means a lot, and it helps the channel. You can also check out part 1 of this series, if you haven't already, from the little video button on screen now. And with all that said, this is gonna be Mini Bite Games heading out. See you guys next time!